Welcome back to Jungle Gap. So it has been around 1 week since Season 16 has started, and with this time, we now are starting to get a better idea what the meta is and which champions are shaping up to be the strongest. So let's get into this tier list. All right, so getting started in the S tier category for above Emerald. So we have 4 champions here. Seeing as how Season 16, very, very fast paced, we all know that these champions are just really, really OP at snowballing. And, I think currently what seems to be is, like assassin kind of champions and snowballing type junglers seem to be the strongest kind of champion. So, firstly talking about Reksai. Reksai is just a champion that honestly has been slept on for a while. Her win rates are absolutely through the roof, especially Emerald and above. So I'll also talk about some champions that can also be played below Emerald, who also still have good win rates below Emerald. But yeah, Reksai just snowballing champion, is a bruiser. However, I think the reason I'm not the biggest Reksai player, honestly, I was a little bit surprised when I saw this, but it makes sense just in a fast-paced game. Champions like Reksai are very, very strong. And, not to get ahead of myself, but, Nunu is also here. So, fast pace, assassin type, ganking type junglers seems to be where the meta is going towards, okay? Now, let's talk about these 2 characters right here. I do think Gwen... Obviously, Gwen and Ekko, very, very similar playstyles, and this is all because of this item, Dusk and Dawn, right? This item is just super, super good for these champions. It almost just makes these champions, well, it does kind of make these champions kick up, a tier. I mean, there were never really, bad champions to start with, but this item is just super, super perfect for these 2 champions specifically. I'll talk about Diana with this item in a second. And last but not least, Assassin. So, as you can see, there's not many... I haven't put all these assassins on here, but champions, any assassin-based or type champion is kind of really, really strong right now. And I think, again, this is for the reason of lethality items are cheap. So the sooner you can get your items power spikes, the sooner you can snowball. The game is very fast-paced. So the sooner you can spike, the sooner you can carry, the sooner you can, take over the game, take over the enemy jungle, take over the enemy camps, take over the objectives. So these junglers, yeah, they're just really, really good in those fast-paced games. Now, with Season 16 finally here, I wanted to quickly let you guys know on how you can fast track your journey to your rank goals. So the Jungle Academy is pretty much the ultimate resource for your climb. We have in-depth guides, the VOD library, the group coaching, and just an entire community of junglers who are there to guide you every step of the way. Join countless of other player testimonials by using code LEO10 for $10 off, and hope to see you all in the Academy. Now, back to the video. Let's go now to the A tier category, which is above Emerald. Okay, so as you can see here, the Diana is here. I decided to not put her in S tier because this may be a hot take, but I don't actually believe that this Dusk and Dawn item is as good on Diana as Gwen and Ekko. And, I've tested all these 3 champions. It seems really insane on Ekko and Gwen. However, for Diana, still really, really strong. I'm not even sure that I would even build this item. Like I said, I'm really not a fan compared to just going, the usual Leandries, tanky build, or just going the full damage one-shot build, death cap, Nashes or whatever it is. So we'll have to keep experimenting with that. That's just my opinion so far. Evelynn moving on now to Evelynn. Evelynn is a champion that I could not believe I was putting here. After being dead for so long, I just was like, okay, well, let me look at what the win rates are doing. Let me look at each region. And Evelynn just popped up in above Emerald as having a really, really solid win rate. And, I thought about it and it makes sense. She is, again, an assassin type of champion. Games are very, very quick. Snowballing is very, very quick. The game, a little bit, I wouldn't say completely, but I think the game is even more than usual about gold and XP and killing. It's very, very, battle royale. It's very, very, fight, and just kill. And then the game's just over. So Evelynn is really good at that. Evelynn is really, really good at basically just making people rage quit. So I do believe that's the reason why her win rate has increased. Talking about Khazix, again, just another assassin, similar to Zed. However, I just think for high elo, I mean, Zed is just on a league of his own just because of, obviously, his insane clear speed. Of course, champions like Khazix, I even have Talon here, so you can kind of just pair these 2 together as well. The Khazix and the Talon, best assassins, I would say, above Emerald right now. There are the honorable mentions like the Shakos and, the Kianas. Of course, 100% you can play them. But I just put these 2 here. Again, my opinion, the win rates, put them in A above slightly, these other assassins. And then finally, this is maybe a little bit my own bias, Jayce. I do think if you have hands, I do think Jayce is a really, really good champ. When you run this specific rune page with cashback and first strike, this champ feels like you can get to your item spikes and snowball the game quicker than any other champion. I think that because this game is a little bit about, it's a vision game, and sometimes it's just you having these standoffs with the enemy, which is also why I think the assassins are good, because they can assassinate people. But the poke that Jayce provides is actually really, really insane in those standoffs. So yeah, this is a little bit of my own bias with the Jayce, but I think he is super, super strong. And then finally, just to round things out, Elise, same thing again. Snowballing champ. I think that this champion is really good in a fast game, super good at killing people, and the win rates are still, she's always been solid, so I may as well put her here. So let's now move on to S tier below Emerald. Okay, so Nunu is here. And Nunu, even a high elo, when I'm looking at like the tier lists, right, and I'm looking at win rates, I'm looking at like what's happening, literally in like every single division, this guy is just here. His face is just showing up in every single division. He is just there. And, especially in the lower divisions, which is why I put him lower, he is just, really, really, really showing up. And it goes back to the same thing I've been saying, okay? This champion is literally really good at snowballing, taking over the map, killing people, ganking people. This could always be because, start of seasons, people are just playing a little bit more, testing limits, fast pace, like everyone just wants to kind of fight and figure out what's going on. So we'll have to wait and see about Nunu, but I thought that this was very, very interesting. Even when I went to, high elos, he did yeah, like look at this, like Emerald is a 55% win rate. Just crazy, along with these other kind of champions that you saw before. I'm honestly going to have to test it out, see what all the hype is about. One champion that I have tested a lot on, which is a champion that I've played quite a lot this season, which is Malphite with a certain rune page, PTA full tank, okay? There's a lot of reasons I've done some thinking about why Malphite is, a really, really good pick. I would say Malphite is also a pick that you can play above, in the right comp. I think he's playable in every single MMR. But especially for low elo, I think he's super OP. Obviously, the reason for that is because he's super, super straightforward, right? I think this champion clears very, very fast, so his tempo is very, very good. I think that his scaling is insane. I think that his fighting when you take PTA is pretty much unmatched. And, obviously his ult, like I said before, very straightforward. Full clear ult, repeat, full clear ult, repeat, full clear ult, repeat kind of champion. I would highly, highly recommend you try out Malphite. I might be coming out with a Malphite video soon. Now, of course, Mundo is still here as well. So as you can see here, like in the S tier and below Emerald, we're actually seeing a lot of tanks. Okay. When I'm looking at when I'm looking at tier lists and when I'm looking at champions, like in the lower ranks, like gold, you're seeing the Rammus. Again, Gwen can also be played. By the way, this is another one of those champions I can be playing low elo. Same with Ekko. But you are still seeing, in terms of win rates, you're seeing a lot of tanks. Okay. And we'll move on to these other tanks as well. But, when we're looking at these lower ranks, I think that tanks right now are actually in a pretty good situation. And I was thinking about this, and the reason why is because tanks spike early.
I mean, we are stronger here now. Yes.
Right, when you get one item on Malphite, when I have my Sunfire Cape, when I have my Heartsteel on Mundo, or whatever it is, right, when I have my Thornmail on Rammus, I feel really, really OP when I have my one item on Liandry's on Amumu. Like, these champions are one item, two item spiking champs who are really, really good at fighting. Okay, so again, the aim of the game, spike, fight, be the diff, get in there. Any champions that take longer than that to spike, the Graves, the Kindred, it's a little bit harder to play. And so, yeah, these champions pretty much undefeated for low elo. I think Rammus is also similar to Nunu, just kind of like that ganking style where people can just die. And so lastly, we get to the A category below Emerald. Okay, so as I said before, tanks, really, really good. Zac, again, spikes one item. Very, very similar to the Mundo, the Malphite, all these champs. Honestly, yeah, no, I could put him up to S. His win rates are really, really good. I just think he's slight cut below these other tanks in terms of, his what he can do as a champion. But still very, really, really good. If you like, kind of going crazy, jumping in, different like kind of gank angles with over the wall and stuff like that. Zac is super, super good. And obviously you can also build him kind of like an AP bruiser as well, going Liandry's and stuff like that. That'll work. Fiddlesticks, moving on now. This is a champion that I did not expect, along with Evelynn, to be putting on into a S or A tier list, but his win rates don't lie. And honestly, this was a very, very difficult one for me to think about, which is like, why is this happening right now? Fiddlesticks kind of wants a slower game, right? He kind of wants, not much fighting. But I think that when everyone is there's so much chaos, I think that Fiddlesticks, especially in the, going into the mid game, he really thrives off that chaos. And I think that, depending on what you build Malignance, right? Your ult's actually up, and Ultimate Hunter, your ult's actually up way more than people expect. When I'm looking at his win rates are always really, really good. Basically in every single, low elo tier, but also even when I get to like Emerald, he kind of hangs around still. Wow, yeah, still a super, super high win rate. So Fiddlesticks, if you like something a little different, something that not many people are playing maybe. And also, now moving on to Lillia. Lillia is also a champ that I never would have expected to put here, but her win rates are really good, which got me thinking, why is that? Well, in low elo, when all these tanks are running around, like, what's the best champion versus all these tanks? It's Lillia. All right, Lillia is really, really, really good into tanks. So, if people are playing a lot of these tank champions, I think she's a pretty straightforward champion. It doesn't require you to have some clicking micro. I wouldn't recommend as much in high elo because people kind of understand what she does. She's a little bit too slow. Of course, low elo games are still always going to be slower than in terms of the game is going to go late game. There's still going to be as much action probably. So yeah, Lillia is a really good scaling pick as well. Really, really, you can carry those fights late game. And of course, the Briar and the Warwick are still here. Their win rates actually dropped off, which really got me curious of why. And of course, I just still think that reason is the bruiser items compared to lethality items. This is the only kind of justification I can think about of why these champions, like the win rates have kind of fallen off. And I just think because, you spike not as hard as tanks, one item, when all these tanks, like when a Malphite is running around, right? The Briar and the Warwick, when Rammus is running around, like these champions are countered by those champs. Yeah, still playable. Just have to think, sometimes in draft, you're versing like a Malphite or a Rammus. Tanks in general, of course, you can build Blade, and these champions can be good versus tanks still. But yeah, again, it's just all about how quickly you spike. But they're still super strong. I'm talking about these champions as if like they're not good. All these champions, by the way, are what I deem to be the strongest champions right now. Any of these champions, you will have a very, very good time with. And last but not least, Coach, why is Nasus here? Why is Nasus jungle in the A tier below Emerald? Well, the reason for that is I'm not really too sure. I was taking a look at some win rates, and I was looking at Nasus, and I was like, what's going on here? And, it kind of got me thinking that, we're talking about how the game is very, very fast paced. But the thing is, low elo games always still kind of go to late game. And Nasus as a playstyle is very, very straightforward, right? You just farm, you press Ghost and Alt. When you want to kill something, that's pretty much it. And you scale, and people kind of just walk into you and fight you, and you're just super OP when you have enough stacks and you fight. So I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly why this is, but the stats are telling me that this is. So if this is something that you want to explore some Nasus jungle, figure out how to clear it this champion. And so yeah, that'll wrap things up. Again, like I said before, guys, your champion is not here. Don't worry about it. If you're really good at that champion, should be able to make it work. But the thing is, right now in the meta, spiking early is very, very important. So tanks and assassins seem dominant so far, okay? Leave a comment down below if you want a guide or any kind of video on any of these champions that we've talked about. Like I said before, Malphite video might be coming out, but if there are any other champions that you would like to see, leave a comment down below, leave a like, consider dropping a sub, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Peace.